Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for being here. This will be part 2, I suppose, of Tripitaka Master Shan Wei. And what we're in the midst of is Nichiren providing a somewhat detailed argument for the correct practice of the Lotus Sutra and Buddhism in its entirety, the 80,000 doctrines of Buddhism. Within those 80,000, there are divisions of different types of documents, doctrines, and so forth. And he's going to mention the 12 divisions of these documents, these doctrine. And when he does, I want you to know that I prepared a video called The 12 Divisions of the Scriptures. And I will link to it at the end of this video. You may want to go look on my channel for it, the 12 divisions. There's also a document that I downloaded that's a pretty reasonable history of how those 12 divisions came about, answers some of the questions some of you have had about what happened with the quote-unquote teachings between the time of Shakyamuni's passing away and 400 or 500 years later, when we started to see some of these documents appearing in China and so forth. There was a lot of activity during that time and scholarship. And so this document touches on a little bit of that. It's a PDF. You can get it by going to threefoldlotus.com and going to on the first page, there's a link near the top, a green button that says Core Studies or Course Study Material. And when you get to that page, you'll see there's like over 50 links for different subjects, different aspects of practicing Buddhism. Near the top will be the Shute map, and right next to it, the 12 divisions. So you can look at that for reference as a study aid for you. And from that, you can see all these keywords that you can go do deep dives on and study. But he's going to, like often happens as you read through sutras and Gosho, there'll be these little dropped references, these little jewels of knowledge that he assumes you already know. So he doesn't go into each one, otherwise he would never finish, right? Kind of like me. Okay, so let's continue. Persons of wisdom, in other words, if you're smart, should, of course, devote themselves to the study of all the 80,000 doctrines of Buddhism and should become familiar with all the 12 divisions of the scriptures. But ignorant persons, living in the latter age of ours, a time of evil and confusion, should discard the so-called difficult to practice and easy way to practice that are the Nembutsu believers and what they talk of, and devote themselves solely to the chanting of Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra. So, just real quick, understand that as Nichiren is talking here, there's kind of a dual thing that he's talking about. On the one hand, he's talking about study and how you should come to realize the depth of the Lotus Sutra. And on the other hand, he's saying practice. Yes, learn, read, understand all those other sutras, but don't use them as your focal point, your focus of practice. The only focus of practice is the culmination of all these different teachings, right? It's like if you want to understand in the West, we have Aesop's fables. If you only read one of them, you're not going to get it. You have to read all of these, or even Shakespeare, if you're into that. All of the writings of Shakespeare combine to make a complete picture of human nature, right? So these are just handy examples, but they pale in comparison to understanding how to achieve your own Buddha nature. But be that as is may, that's what he's talking about here. You can't just devote yourself to either any one of those teachings without practicing the ultimate teachings. Those will buoy up your understanding of what it is that you're trying to accomplish. Okay, enough on that. Said it too many times. When the sun rises in the eastern sector of the sky, and all the skies of the great continent of Jambudvipa in the south will be illuminated because of the vast light that the sun possesses. Another analogy. But the feeble glow of a firefly will never shed light on the whole nation. So he's comparing a firefly to the sun because he's saying that although the firefly is definitely in our world and a part of illumination in our world, it doesn't illuminate the way the sun does, right? One who carries in one's robe a wish-granting jewel can have any desire fulfilled, but the shards and stones can confer no treasures. The Nembutsu and other practices, when compared to the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra, are like shards and stones compared to the precious jewel, or like the flicker of a firefly compared to the light of the sun. How can we, whose eyes are dull, ever distinguish the true colors of things by the mere glow of a firefly? The fact is that the lesser provisional sutras of the Nembutsu and the true word schools are not teachings that enable ordinary people to attain Buddhahood. Our teacher, the thus come one Shakyamuni, in the course of his lifetime of teachings, expounded 80,000 sacred doctrines. He was the first Buddha to appear in this Saha world of ours, which previously had not known any Buddha. And he opened the eyes of all living beings. All the other Buddhas and Bodhisattvas from east, west, and lands of 10 directions received instructions from him. So that's a very important statement he's making there, because in part of these 80,000 doctrines, Buddha talks himself about 547, I believe, other lifetimes, how he was a this or that in history. And it's only in the Lotus Sutra that you learn that all of those were expedient means to help you understand that Buddha nature, in and of itself, is something that's always been around. That he didn't just suddenly materialize when he was born or when he attained enlightenment at 30. But if you don't know that, then you can assume that there are 400 or 548 different Shakyamuni Buddhas. But that's not the case. So you can't just go by those provisional teachings. They all are in service to the main point, which is only illustrated in the Lotus. So that's his point here. The period prior to his advent was like the time before the appearance of the sovereigns and emperors of ancient China, when people did not know their own fathers, who their fathers were, and lived like beasts. In the time before Emperor Yao, people knew nothing about the duties to be performed in the 4 seasons, like cultivation and so on and so forth, and were as ignorant as oxen or horses. In the period before Shakyamuni Buddha appeared in the world, there were no orders of monks or nuns, because those were formations of groups of the Sangha that were given certain ascetic privations in order to raise their capacity to understand what Shakyamuni was going to teach them. But a lot of people will look at those privations and rules and so forth of monasteries and assume that is the practice of Buddhism. It was that practice of Buddhism at that time because he was training them. There were only the 2 categories at that time of men and women. But now we have monks and nuns who are teachers of the true word school and who have decided to look upon the thus come one Mahavarachana as their object of devotion. Their objective, he'll say that better in a minute. Demoting the thus come one Shakyamuni to an inferior position, or who are believers in the Nembutsu, and who pay honor solely to Amida Buddha, a creation of Shakyamuni's, thrusting the thus come one Shakyamuni aside. How crazy is that? They are monks and nuns owing to Shakyamuni Buddha, but because of the erroneous teachings handed down from the founders of these various schools, they have been led to behave in this way. So he's showing you how that came about. This is through hundreds of years of tradition through these erroneous sects that these people now believe that Shakyamuni is some secondary. They got it backwards. There are 3 reasons why the thus come one Shakyamuni, rather than any other Buddhas, has a relationship with all the living beings of this Saha world. First of all, he's the world-honored one, the sovereign of all the living beings of this Saha world. Amida Buddha is not the monarch of this world. In this respect, Shakyamuni Buddha is like the ruler of the country in which we live. We pay respect, first of all, to the ruler of our own country, and only then do we go on to pay respect to rulers of others. Because we understand the nature of paying respect, which is what Shakyamuni's teachings are about in this sense. The sun goddess and great bodhisattva Hachiman are the original rulers of our country. Another example in Japan, in this case. Provisional manifestations of Shakyamuni who appeared in the form of local deities. Again, provisional. You hear that word a lot, provisional, or emanations of in sutras. Because these are thought experiments of Shakyamuni's. So you can't pay homage to the thought experiment without first paying homage to Shakyamuni, the creator of that. Right? Analogies can be great, but without knowing what they refer to, analogies are just stories. Right? Okay. Provisional manifestation of the Buddha who appeared in the form of local deities. One who turns one's back on these deities cannot become the ruler of the country. Thus, the sun goddess is embodied in the form of the sacred mirror known as Naishidokoro, and imperial messengers are sent to great Bodhisattva Hachiman to report to him and receive his oracle. Shakyamuni, the world-honored one of the Great Enlightenment, is our august sovereign. It is he who is to be regarded as the object of devotion. Again, object not being in the Western sense of a thing like a book, but more of a devotion to and a figurehead to follow or to seek. See, more like objective. It's confusing because translation. The second reason is that this thus come one Shakyamuni is the father and mother of all living beings in this Saha world. It is proper that we should first of all pay filial respect to our own father and mother, and only then extend the same kind of respect to the fathers and mothers of other people. We have the example of King Wu of the ancient land of Chao, who carved a wooden image of his deceased father and placed it in a carriage, designating it as the general who would lead his troops into battle. Heaven, moved by such conduct, lent him protection, and thus he succeeded in overthrowing his enemy, Cho, of the king Yin. Woo! Yeah, I want to interject something here. The ancient ruler Shan grieved because his father had gone blind, shed tears. But when he wiped his hands, wet with those tears, on his father's eyes, his father's eyesight was restored. Now, Shakyamuni Buddha does the same for all of us living beings, opening our eyes so as to, quote, open the door of Buddha wisdom, end quote, innate within us. No other Buddha has ever yet opened our eyes in such a way. So it can get confusing here because I have to remind you, Buddha is not a man. In these stories, in these discussions, in the Gosho, in sutras, Buddha refers to himself as a man because he is a living being in that time, almost 3,000 years ago. But the Buddha that they refer to as the original, the enlightenment, the world-honored one, is, there's a duality in here that can be confusing. It is the ultimate nature of that which we manifest as father and mother, that exists, that there's a species, that there is a life form, the formation of life from amoeba to human, that follows from this energy, it is a duality. Everything is dual in our existence. So there is what you might say a component of all that life force, that life energy, that is a pairing of parents, of mother and father, And so in our immediate environment, we pay homage to our particular father and mother. Once we understand that relationship, we can then extend it to other fathers and mother, and by extension to the father and mother of life itself. So that's what he's trying to illustrate here, okay, in the words of his day. The third reason is that Shakyamuni is the original teacher of all living beings in this Saha world. He was born in central India as the son of King Suddhodana during the 9th Kalpa of decrease in the present wise Kalpa, when the lifespan of human beings measured 100 years. He left family life at age 19, achieved enlightenment at 30, and spent the remaining 50 years of his life expounding the sacred teachings. He passed away at the age of 80, leaving behind his relics to provide the means of salvation for all living beings of the former, middle, and latter days of the law, the 80,000 doctrines. The thus come one Amida, the Buddha medicine master, Mahavarachana, and the others, on the other hand, are Buddhas of other lands. They are not world-honored ones of this world of ours. Yeah. You understand that these other lands are mental landscapes. Your worldview and my worldview are unique to you and I. We share a common methodology of understanding our own ideology, our own worldview, but our worldviews aren't identical. The teachings of Shakyamuni Buddha are the teachings or the Dharma or the energy that manifests a worldview. Do you understand the difference? There is the specific and there's the general. There's the general that is the fountain, the spawning point of, and then there are manifestations of various ways of that one point. Okay? The Saha world occupies the lowest position among all the worlds of the 10 directions. Among these worlds, it holds a place like that of a prison within a nation. All the persons in the worlds of the 10 directions who have committed any of the 10 evil acts, the 5 cardinal sins, the grave offenses of slandering the correct teaching, or other terrible crimes, and have been driven out by the Buddhas, thus come ones of those worlds, have been brought together here in the Saha land by the thus come one Shakyamuni. He's going backwards up to this analogy. These people, having fallen into the 3 evil paths, or the great citadel of hell of incessant suffering, which is life itself, and there duly suffered for their offenses, have been reborn in the realm of human or heavenly beings. But because they still retain certain vestiges of their former evil behavior, they are inclined to easily commit some further offense by slandering the correct teaching or speaking contemptuously of persons of wisdom. Thus, for example, Shariputra. And you may have to go study him, but he's one of the characters in the Lotus Sutra that you need more understanding of in previous sutras to really understand the concept of Shariputra. Though he had attained the status of an arhat, at times gave way to anger. Pilidavasa, though he had freed himself from the illusions of thought and desire, displayed an arrogant mind, while Nanda, though he had, not Ananda, but Nanda, though he had renounced all sexual attachment, continued to dwell on the thought of sleeping with a woman. Even these disciples of the Buddha, though they had done away with delusions, still retained their vestiges. How much more so must this be the case, therefore, with ordinary people? Yet the thus come one Shakyamuni entered this Saha world with the title, quote, one who can endure, end quote. He is so called because he does not berate these people for the slanders they all commit, but shows them forbearance. So I think I'm going to pause here. Maybe, well, no, we still got plenty of time. I'm going to keep going. These then are the special qualities possessed by Shakyamuni Buddha, qualities that the other Buddhas lack. Amida Buddha and the other various Buddhas were determined to make compassionate vows. For this reason, though they felt ashamed to do so, they made their appearance in this Saha world. Amida Buddha proclaiming his 48 vows, and Medicine Master Buddha his 12 great vows. Perceivers of the world, sounds, and the other bodhisattvas who live in those other lands also did likewise. Now ask yourself, he's talking in terms of these other teachings that are current in his day. So he's not establishing these as fact. What he's saying is they are a fact in the language and sutras and sects that these people are following. So he's using their words, okay? And the point here is that they're taking vows. Well, they're taking vows to whom? To what? This is the organizing principle, Shakyamuni Buddha, the Buddha of all Buddhas. In other words, the representative Buddha nature that all of us have within each of the 10 worlds, within themselves, and again, the 10 within the 10. So wherever you are in your karmic life, Buddhahood is always there. That's why it's accessible and innate in you now, in your Buddha land, your Buddha world. But they're all derivative of, if you will, the Buddha land, the Buddha nature, the Buddha-ness, suchness, inherent in all life in the universe. When the Buddhas are viewed in terms of the unchanging equality of their enlightenment, there are no distinctions to be made among them. But when they are viewed in terms of the ever-present differences among their preaching, then one should understand that each of them has its own realm among the worlds of the 10 directions, and that they distinguish between those with whom they have already had some connection, and those with whom they had no such connection. This is what I was trying to explain earlier, that your Buddha world and mine, though they both reference the Buddha nature, are unique to each of us. So you need to strive to awaken your own Buddha nature, which is, of course, part of the whole. But if you think that my Buddha nature is the Buddha nature you should be perceiving, you're misleading yourself and you're going to fall into bad practices. That's the whole lesson here. The 16 royal sons of the Buddha, great universal wisdom, excellence, each took up residence in a different one of the lands of the 10 directions, and there led their respective disciples to salvation. The thus come one Shakyamuni, who had been one of these sons, appeared in this Saha world. We ordinary people, too, have been born into the Saha world. Therefore, we must not in any way turn away from the teachings of the thus come one Shakyamuni. But people all fail to realize this. If they would look carefully into the matter, they would understand that, as the Lotus Sutra says, quote, I, Shakyamuni, am the only person who can rescue and protect others, end quote, and that they must not cut themselves off from the helping hand of the thus come one Shakyamuni. For this reason, all the living beings in the Saha world, if they detest the sufferings of birth and death, and wish to have an object of devotion to which they can pay respect, should first of all fashion images of Shakyamuni Buddha in the form of wooden statues and paintings, and make these their object of devotion. Then, if they still have strength left over, they may go on to fashion images of Amida and other Buddhas. So, again, he's talking in his day, this is pre-Gohonzon, right? So he's saying, if you need to shift your thinking, and if all you've been taught right now is Amida Buddha is it, you need to start taking that apart and shifting to the more original, the source of Amida himself, which is Shakyamuni. So he's saying one way to do that is to start shifting away from all your images and statues and replacing them with something more accurate and more total. That's the first step. But in a very real way, what his prelude in this is that eventually he's going to create Gohonzon, and Gohonzon isn't an image as the Buddha himself, Shakyamuni Buddha himself would say, don't follow me, don't follow persons, don't follow any other example than the law itself, the teaching itself, the Dharma itself. Why? Because this is your enlightenment. Because these are teachings for you to figure out your path, your specific veils to that portal of clear understanding of everything. It's not Amita's land, it's not my land, it's not somebody else's land. This is your worldview, your land of perception. So then he says, once you're on that path, if you want to have these other tokens around to remind you of certain teachings, okay, but they shouldn't be your focus. Yet, when the people of this world today, being unpracticed in the sacred way, come to fashion or paint images of a Buddha, they give priority to those of Buddhas other than Shakyamuni. This does not accord either with the intentions of those other Buddhas or with the intentions of the thus come one Shakyamuni himself, and is moreover at variance with secular propriety. The great king Udayana, when he carved his image of red sandalwood, made it of no other Buddha, and the painting offered to King 1,000 stupas was likewise of the thus come one Shakyamuni. But people nowadays base themselves upon the various Mahayana sutras, and because they believe that the particular sutra they rely on is superior to all others, they accordingly relegate Shakyamuni Buddha to a secondary position. It's a mistake. Thus, all the masters of the true word school, convinced that Mahavarachana Sutra surpasses all other sutras, regard the thus come one Mahavarachana, who is described therein as the Supreme Buddha, as the one with whom they have a special connection. The Nembutsu priests, on the other hand, putting their resolute mind of determination in the Meditation Sutra, look upon Amida Buddha as the one who has some special connection with this Saha world of ours. But they don't recognize that these are emanations of Shakyamuni. These are mental exercises that he created. They're not original. They're not self-manifesting. Because the people of our time in particular have mistaken the erroneous doctrines of the Shan Dao and Honen for the correct teachings and taken the three Pure Lands Sutras as their guide, 8 or 9 out of every 10 temples that they build have Amida Buddha enshrined as the principal object of devotion. And in the dwellings of both lay believers and priests, in houses by the tens, the hundreds, or the thousands, the image hall attached to the residence is dedicated to Amida Buddha. Moreover, among the 1,000 or 10,000 paintings and images of Buddhas to be found in a single household today, the great majority are of Amida Buddha. Yet people who are supposed to be wise in such matters see these things happening and do not regard them unfortunate. On the contrary, they find such proceedings quite in accord with their own views and consequently greet them with nothing but praise and admiration. Paradoxically, as it may seem, evil people who have not the least understanding of the principles of cause and effect, and who are not dedicated to any Buddha whatsoever, would appear to be the ones free from such errors with respect to Buddhism. Ouch. So, on that note, I'm going to end this video and we'll have a part 3. But there's a lot to chew on there. And I'll have a link here to the 12 divisions. So you can go look that up. It's on my website as a PDF document with some history on what happened between the death of Shakyamuni Buddha and the following few hundred years, how the scholarship was put together and disseminated. And of course, this is where the 12 divisions comes into play. So it's a good resource document, and I invite you to download it, study it, or just watch the video and see my interpretation of it. But don't just rely on what I say. Do your own research. I'm so overjoyed that from your comments that my interpretations, my efforts to pass these teachings along in a vernacular that's more understandable to us today, that it affects you, it helps your practice, and it helps you understand anew the complexities of all this flowery language and so forth. That's my goal. So a lot of you are gratifying me with success in that regard. And so thank you so much. Heartfelt thank you. And we'll see you in the next one. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo.